we go. And I will start on all of this front. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar about integrating greenhouse gas considerations into urban expansion. I'll admit our focus has been on greenhouse gas emissions because, well, that's our bias and that's what we are, our modus operandi. But it's not only the greenhouse gas emissions that I know many municipalities are considering as part of this. It's also about the infrastructure costs associated with these urban expansions as well, and how to bring that the short-term and longer-term thinking and infrastructure implications associated with where our growth takes place into consideration on this front. And to start this conversation on what are municipalities doing to try and address the issue of the requirement for them to consider urban expansion requests is, well, and I should also mention that this urban expansion request that Charlie and Melissa and Lorraine will actually all speak to is not something necessarily that municipalities have decided that they needed to address on their own. It was a provincial requirement that municipalities need to consider urban expansion requests from development community. And as such, the question is then, how are municipalities approaching the need to consider urban expansion requests as part of the provincial requirements on municipalities? And that's gonna, well, we are really thankful to have Charlie from the City of Hamilton and Melissa and Lorraine from the City of Ottawa to start out that conversation for the work that their municipalities have been doing to try and understand how they're going to be handling urban expansion requests from the development community. We will have a Q&A after the presentations. We will also be having we're seeking input from other municipalities who may also be advancing this effort internally within their municipalities to figure out like how is their municipality handling the urban expansion request requirement on the provincial planning front. So that's the key kind of top level items on the agenda. We are recording this webinar and we will be sharing out the proceedings and from this webinar with everybody through email. So you'll have access to all of that so you can share it with others in your municipality or others in your community who may be interested in this webinar. So please do feel free to share this proceedings as we move forward. So just, I'd like to do a land acknowledgements. The Clean Air Partnership acknowledges that the land on which we operate is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And we've been trying to really build our understanding of Indigenous ways of being and knowing and how we can bring that into our work. And it's often not the easiest way to figure out how to go about doing all of that. But one of the key things that we wanted to share, and I'll throw a whole bunch of links in with this, is that we're also looking for resources that we can better access to understand the Indigenous perspective and Indigenous work taking place on the energy transition, on the decarbonization front, on overall climate justice as a whole. And there's some really great publications from the Indigenous Climate Action Group that has some fabulous resources. So I'm going to throw those links into the chat afterwards, but we really wanted to give a good plug for some of the amazing resources coming out of this organization, some really good insights. And I did want to give a little bit of background for anyone who is new to the Clean Air Partnership about who we are and what we try and do. We're a charitable environmental organization, and really our main modus operandi is to help municipalities increase the ambition and implementation of their climate actions. We do it in a number of different ways: network facilitation, information sharing, resource and lessons learned sharing on this one. And we wouldn't be able to do our work without the generosity of the municipal staff who share their progress with all the other municipalities. So big shout out to all the municipal sharings taking place. Thank you for this, because this would not be possible without that. And we really want to help and facilitate an opportunity for dialogue across municipalities. I did want to do a little plug for some upcoming CAP events. There's the data tools for community energy planners and climate coordinators. That's based on kind of some learning, some other municipalities that advanced the climate neutral tools and brought them into their kind of climate work, and what kind of progress came from that, or what kind of experiences came from that, as well as new offerings on the modeling and carbon budgeting that are part of the climate neutral software. And then, of course, the municipal contributions to economic risk sharing, which is an U of T professor who is joining us to share some of the research that they've done, in particular on how Quebec is handling how Quebec municipalities and opportunities are for handling flood risk. I will throw the links in. I will throw the links into the chat. But I did also want to know that some of the discussion questions we're hoping to kind of have conversations taking place as part of this webinar is we really would love to get a little bit of insight on how your municipality is handling the issue of provincial requirements related to municipal decision making related to urban expansion requests. So we're just trying to kind of get a little bit of insight on how is this topic being discussed, or where is it on the radar in your municipality, and what are the approaches that your municipalities using on trying to address this issue? Any last minute kind of things, any kind of points or issues on this topic that people would like to set as context before we get into the presentations? All right, then we will dig right into the presentations, and I will be asking for Charlie to share his screen. We're going to hear from Hamilton first on this one, and then we're going to hear from Ottawa on how they're approaching it, and then we'll have Q&A and then a roundtable for municipalities. So Charlie, I think you should be able to share your screen, and just don't forget, because I always forget, just the sharing with the sound on the video.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can't see people anymore, but can everyone hear me fine?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay,
and you
great.
just need to get your presentation into slideshow format.
Yeah. There you go.
Perfect. Take it away, Charlie. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Just give me 1 second here.
No problem.
Yes, my name is Charlie Toman. I'm the program lead for policy planning and municipal comprehensive review with the City of Hamilton's planning division. I'm a registered professional planner, and I guess I've been the project lead on the city's response to privately initiated urban boundary expansion applications. I also want to note that on this call is Linda Lukaskic, who is the director of the Office of Climate Change Initiatives, also with the City of Hamilton, and that I might ask her to step in to answer some questions as well. So I'm not sure where everyone on this call is from, but just a quick high-level summary of Hamilton. So Hamilton, similar to Ottawa, is a single-tier municipality. We went through an amalgamation about 25 years ago that merged the city of Hamilton with the surrounding rural municipalities. And as a result, we're a very large municipality at over 1,000 square kilometers, and we are also growing. So the city has a population of about 570 thousand people, but we are forecasted to increase our population to 820,000, or 250,000 people over the next roughly 30 years. So from a planning perspective, one huge unique thing about the city of Hamilton is that we have two official plans. We have an urban Hamilton official plan and a rural Hamilton official plan. And they are both separate and have to be updated separately, but they both work together to create like the city's overall planning vision and policies. And also on the map in the top right corner, within rural Hamilton, the vast majority of our rural lands are covered by both the Greenbelt Plan and the Niagara Escarpment Plan, which means for urban boundary expansion applications, there is limited places where those could go. So what is our current growth strategy related to urban boundary expansions? I could talk a lot more about sort of how we got to where we are, but in 2021, City Council approved a firm urban boundary growth strategy where all of our forecasted employment and population growth was directed within the existing urban boundaries. So there would be no new urban boundary expansions in order to sort of allow for the creation of new residential neighborhoods. And then within that, to accommodate this growth, the official plan sets that 80% of that growth is directed to the existing built-up area through residential intensification. And then the other 20% is directed to designated greenfield sites that were already within the urban boundary. And then just a bit of history, under the Planning Act, the province was the approval authority for this update to the city's official plan, and they initially overturned council's direction and expanded the urban boundary by about 2,200 hectares before then reversing that decision in December 2023 and restoring the council's direction for a firm urban boundary. Page. So there's been a lot of interest around the city's urban boundary. So instead of sort of trying to explain how the changes have impacted Hamilton, I'm going to play a short video that we've produced to sort of inform the public of how we are responding to these changes.
The audio is a little bit low. Charlie, is it possible to turn it louder?
How do we make sure it grows sustainably?
Oh, okay, that's great.
Guided by extensive community engagement and our growth management strategy, City Council has adopted a no urban boundary expansion growth strategy. But recent provincial policy changes allow proponents to propose urban boundary expansions of any size, at any time. In addition, proponents can now appeal Council's refusal or lack of decision on an expansion application to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which now restricts third-party appeals. The City of Hamilton did not support these new policies, which diminish the city's ability to manage growth according to its established plans. In response, the City of Hamilton has developed a process that adheres to provincial rules, but helps to ensure that any proposed urban boundary expansions are carefully assessed against our community's priorities. So what's the urban boundary, and why is it so important? The city's municipal urban boundary is the line that defines the edge of Hamilton's urban areas, separating it from surrounding rural areas and farmland. It isn't just a line on a map. A firm urban boundary helps manage Hamilton's growth responsibly by protecting green spaces, preserving farmland, and focusing on using existing infrastructure more efficiently through residential intensification. In other words, building the housing we need for our growing population, but within the existing built-up area. Much of the rural lands surrounding Hamilton are already protected by what's known as the Greenbelt. However, there are over 4,000 hectares of land outside the established urban boundary and outside the protection of the Greenbelt. This area, called the White Belt, is an area where urban boundary expansion applications can now be made with these provincial changes. Even though Hamilton has a firm no urban boundary expansion policy in place, under the new provincial bill, the city can't simply refuse to process urban boundary expansion proposals. The city will need to respond and assess applications for urban boundary expansions, and all within 120 days, or it can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In response to these provincial policy changes, the city has developed a draft framework for processing and evaluating urban boundary expansion applications. This framework aims to ensure that any proposed urban boundary expansions are carefully assessed against the city's priorities. The framework has 3 parts. Part A outlines the various items an applicant must submit, such as specific plans and studies. Part B establishes a set of considerations for the city's rigorous review process. addressing issues such as impacts on farmland, infrastructure capacity and costs, and financial viability. And Part C sets out a process for Indigenous community consultation and public engagement throughout the review of the application. The framework reflects the city's commitment to managing sustainable economic and ecological development, a priority for City Council. It also guides well-informed decisions based on evidence, community input, and a long-term perspective. The draft framework and determining our city's process for reviewing urban boundary expansion applications are not yet finalized, and the City of Hamilton is actively seeking public input to shape the final version. Visit engage.hamilton.ca/UBE application framework to learn more and get involved.
Okay, great. That probably sort of explains sort of where we are better than me trying to break it down in slides, but just moving on. There we go. So the planning department, the draft framework that was talked about in the video, the planning department brought that to planning committee and council for approval last summer. And when we presented it, we asked for a number of things to help the city respond to urban boundary expansion applications. One was that we are able to use the draft framework until we finalize it into official plan policy, just because we knew as soon as the provincial planning statement was going to come into effect, we were going to start seeing applications. They gave direction for a new team within the planning and economic development department, just for urban boundary expansion applications, recognizing that once the applications are made, there's a very short window to quickly preview those and get them in front of council, but then also understanding that if and when they are appealed, there's a lot of staff time associated with giving evidence at the Ontario Land Tribunal. We established new fees for processing these types of applications. And council also directed that we add 1.5 million through the budget process to the city's Ontario Land Tribunal capital account in anticipation of appeals and recognizing that those can be very costly. Sorry. So just a bit more zoomed into where we are now going to be seeing urban boundary expansion applications. These areas here, both in the cream color and the purple, are the lands they're referred to as white belt lands. So lands outside of the urban boundary and outside of the greenbelt plan area. And the cream colored areas are ones where we could get urban boundary expansion applications for residential uses, but because we have the Hamilton International Airport here, there are noise restrictions to the east and west. That would mean that any urban boundary expansion application in the purple area, you couldn't have sensitive land uses like residential or a school. So those would potentially be employment or commercial areas. So the video touched upon it a bit, but for this webinar, I was really going to focus on the energy and climate change assessment report that we've identified as a submission requirement for urban boundary expansion applications. So because our official plan had a firm urban boundary, it doesn't contemplate these types of applications at all. So Part A of the framework sets out specific application requirements and studies that would have to be submitted with any privately initiated urban boundary expansion application. And for the draft framework, we hired Dillon Consulting, who gave us help kind of giving the blueprints of what some of those studies would look like that we haven't had to process before. And that includes the energy and climate change assessment report. So just drilling into that a bit more, what's in the draft framework now is a number of, I'll call it like a high-level terms of reference of what we expect any applicant who submits an application and submits the energy and climate change assessment report, what that report has to look at. And generally, they need to show within the report that what the impact of the potential urban boundary expansion application would have on the city's ability to achieve carbon neutrality. And it should also include targets or objectives for the proposed expansion area as it relates to energy and climate change. And that those targets, if the applicant is putting forward targets, those should form part of their application. And then getting into a bit more details, it kind of breaks it down into different buckets of what the assessment should look at. One is site design related impacts, and opportunities should show if or how the site design elements for the expansion will mitigate urban heat island effect. Sorry, and preserve or protect the natural environment. Looking at the land use patterns, so what are the related impacts and opportunities? Should the what is the transportation related impacts on the greenhouse gas emissions? Should the city should the urban boundary expansion be approved? Building design and the use related impacts and opportunities should show how the potential expansion will allow for energy efficient building design, and that applicants should also provide information on the feasibility of providing things like electric vehicle supply equipment to the entire expansion area. And then finally, the overall greenhouse gas emission impacts of the expansion should be modeled to show what the impacts would have on the city's net zero goal, as identified in the city's community energy and emissions plan. And that this result would ideally outline the key assumptions related to population, employment, dwelling units, industry type, transportation modal splits, energy impacts, and everything else that basically would add to greenhouse gas emissions. So really give us as much information as possible on what you're proposing to use the lands for, so we can understand, so that the applicant understands and can model what the impacts would be. Part B of the draft framework establishes thematic considerations that the city would use to assess urban boundary expansion applications. And the 11 themes in general, the descriptions are listed here, and that includes climate change right there. And within the draft framework, it was emphasized that these considerations don't represent minimum criteria, that which if the applicant thinks they address them would result in a positive recommendation from city staff. Rather, these considerations would require that any urban boundary expansion application proceed would have to look at and assess broader elements like the design impact on the city's intensification rate, land use compatibility, impacts to natural heritage, climate change, and the overall impact to the city's financial position should it be approved. And really the goal is to make sure that the applicants know that they have to look at these things, because city staff are going to be looking at them when we review the application, and really push the applicants to put forward the highest quality application that they can. And I won't get into the details here, but and I can share a link to the draft framework after this webinar. But within it, related to climate change, there's a number of specific questions that the framework asks, which, sorry, I've got a cold. Which city staff would have to look at when we're looking at the application, and let council know how the application, impacts or achieves or looks at all of these different factors, which are over and above the criteria in the provincial planning statement. And then finally, part C of the framework sets out the process in which any urban boundary expansion application would be received, processed, considered, and decided for the benefit of both the applicant and the public. And that this section of the draft framework really emphasized and required notification and a consultation with the public as well as with Indigenous communities. One of the challenges with the changes that the province has made is once that application is deemed complete, the city only has 120 days to process it, which really limits the ability for the city to consult after the application has been deemed complete. But one thing that the framework really does is push the applicant to hold meetings and meet with Indigenous communities prior to even submitting the application, so that the overall community is well aware of the application. The applicant has a chance to hear what people are saying about it and actually look at that. And yeah, just to improve the overall transparency of the process. So what happens next? So we finished up our consultation on the draft framework late last year, and right now we're in the process of preparing a final framework, which would be submitted to council along with official plan amendments to enshrine a lot of the requirements in the draft framework into official plan policies to give those requirements more teeth. And with that, as part of the final framework, we will be developing a formal terms of reference for an energy and climate change assessment, just for urban boundary expansion applications, and seek council's approval of that terms of reference, providing clear direction to applicants on what the city's expectations are for those. So I'll stop sharing my screen so I can.
Right. Thank you so much, Charlie. And thank you very much for presenting, knowing that you have a cold and everything. Thank you for carrying on despite the cold. Appreciate that. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm just going to turn it over to Melissa and Lorraine from the City of Ottawa, who will share a little bit of the story of Ottawa's journey on this effort. And then we'll have time for Q&A after the presentation. Take it away, Melissa and Lorraine. And I see your slides. And they're in slideshow format, so all good.
I'm going to start off our presentation, and then Melissa will finish it off. So what I'm going to discuss is the process for dealing with the urban boundary expansion official plan application process, and then Melissa will get more into the detail of the community energy plan and how it fits in with our review. So good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm Lorraine Stevens. I'm a senior policy planner with the City of Ottawa, and my focus is to work on the official plan. We have a relatively, oh, sorry, you can go to the next slide, Melissa. We have a relatively new OP approved by MMH in November of 2022, and we also have a large urban and rural components, but we're only under one official plan. And as Gabby mentioned, the new provincial policy statement is now in effect. Charlie did a great job of describing that process. But basically, the province did not give us any transition provisions to help in the PPS's implementation, and private applications can now be considered as of October 20th, where previously expansions could only occur at the time of municipal comprehensive review. And the province has even removed the term municipal comprehensive review from the PPS entirely. So it was necessary for the city, similar to Hamilton, it was necessary for the City of Ottawa to set up a process to consider privately initiated settlement area expansion official plan amendment applications outside of having our official plan updated to be consistent with the new PPS. Next slide. So the request from a private application would be received through an official plan official plan amendment application, and this is specific for it. We have it our own type just for urban boundary expansions, or I shouldn't say urban settlement area expansions, because they could also occur with our villages. We have 26 villages, and there could also be a village expansion application. So the applicants don't have access to sufficient off-site infrastructure information or models relating to the city's drinking water and sanitary sewer networks. So they will require assistance from city staff to determine if sufficient land plan capacity exists in the relevant master plan. And this requires city resources. So our development review is on a cost recovery basis. So our process includes fees prior to an OPA application. Next slide. So this is our graduated fee and off ramps. This slide provides visualizations of the steps to review an expansion application and the off ramps at key decision points. The infrastructure work illustrated in blue would be split into two parts: an assessment of existing servicing capacity, and this to apply for this would be $250,000, and where capacity does not exist, the second step would identify projects and the cost of offsite works required to accommodate the expansion, and the city charges $150,000 for this work. If the applicant still wants to move forward, they would submit an OPA application and pay a fee of $1.4 million. The planning work is split into three parts, illustrated as steps 3, 4, and 5, and the applicant can decide not to proceed and recover some of their application fee. Some new terms of references were created. So, and of those two studies, we have a land need assessment. So do we actually need more land? So that deals with our growth projections, and they, because we've done a recent official plan review, they have to indicate why our growth projections are not correct or not accurate. And then there's also a settlement area parcel analysis. By stating that if we do indeed need more land, is this place the best place for it? And then the last step is a decision by council. Next slide. So if council approved the application, or if it was determined by the tribunal to add the lands would be designated future neighborhood overlay in our OP. Next slide. So I've shown, we actually have several of these maps to show for the city of Ottawa, but this is one of our suburban sections of our official plan. So what I'm demonstrating here are current future neighborhood designated lands in our suburban west transect. And this was the green circles show the lands added from our last municipal comprehensive review, and lands from an approved private application would be added in the same way. Next slide. So then we have future neighborhood overlay policies, which requires the overlay to be removed by another official plan amendment application before development can proceed. A neighborhood designation can be put in place by means of a community design process and the creation of secondary plan policies. Next slide. One requirement when developing a secondary plan is for the development of a community energy plan. Slide. So in summary, for privately initiated settlement area expansion applications, if successful, lands are designated future neighborhood overlay. Lands can only be designated for development if designated neighborhood through an OPA for a secondary plan. For that secondary plan to be adopted, a community energy plan is a requirement. So in summary, development cannot occur on settlement area expansions privately initiated without consideration of a community energy plan. Now over to Melissa, who will discuss community energy plans.
Thanks, Lorraine. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I'm Melissa Jork-Conway. I'm a planner in the Climate Change and Resiliency branch of Strategic Initiatives Department at the City of Ottawa. We have been working alongside planning to embed a climate lens within our official plan. The community energy plan requirement was put in place as part of the City of Ottawa's new official plan approved in 2022 by the province. And I'm going to just walk you through what we have come up with in terms of a new terms of reference. So this would be a new submission requirement for lands that are to be brought into the urban boundary, and they have to, they're basically within an area called the Future Neighborhoods Overlay. So in order for them to put in place a new secondary plan, they need to submit a community energy plan in order to lift that overlay and to bring the lands into the urban boundary. So what this plan is it's basically an opportunity to look at from the scale of a brand new community. So you could look at it from the lens of like in the urban area, it could be a redevelopment area, because we're also requiring community energy plans as part of new plans of subdivision as well under the Planning Act. But if you're looking at it from a greenfield lens, it's at the scale of a brand new community. So at the outset, it's considering emissions and energy consumption and conservation at the outset of the design of that community. And as Lorraine said, we've embedded the authority for that under the Planning Act. So what it is the ability for the proponent to establish objectives and targets for the new community and how they intend to reach a certain target for energy conservation and reduction of emissions. And there's different ways that they can go about accomplishing a community energy plan. But I'll just say, whether they do it as through a prescriptive approach or a performance approach, there could be some quantitative analysis that is undertaken that looks at building energy consumption as well as transportation energy consumption and the design of transportation infrastructure. The other consideration that goes into community energy plans is energy resiliency, and also looking at our climate projections. So City of Ottawa worked with the National Capital Commission to project what our future climate is going to look like. And those considerations on climate have to be taken into consideration as well. So in terms of the objectives of a community energy plan, it's basically, if they decide to do the modeling work and they establish a target, a performance target, we want them to evaluate those targets against our established plans. So we have, from a citywide perspective, we have a long range goal to reduce emissions 100% by 2050. We also have short and midterm targets. So if they're going through a performance lens and taking a performance pathway approach, they would be comparing their established target to the citywide targets. The CEP is also intended to allow that early consideration. As I said earlier, it's an opportunity for them to engage with key stakeholders in terms of looking at what's currently planned for in the area, looking and meeting with utility partners and trying to look at what alternatives are possible, whether there's any upgrades or servicing that are planned within the area. And then, of course, implementation. So what are their plans for implementation of approved targets and measures? I don't want to go on too long because I'm mindful of time. But as I was mentioning earlier, there's two pathways that you can take for a community energy plan. There's the performance pathway or a prescriptive pathway. And these are all set out in the terms of reference document that we've prepared. So just quickly, the performance pathway is looking at a specific energy an emission reduction target, and they have to incorporate how those targets are to be met. The prescriptive pathway looks at predefined standards or commitments to adhere to certain energy conservation measures. What's required for the performance is setting those targets and doing some modeling of performance. On the prescriptive side, it would be more a commitment to a specific energy performance standard, such as Energy Star, or they commit to a set of energy conservation measures that we provide them and that they can pick. And then you can just sort of see here where we've outlined what they are best suited for, depending on the pathway that they choose. So either a larger scale community design may want to choose to do a performance pathway, or if they're looking to do something innovative like district energy or geothermal solutions, versus maybe a prescriptive pathway is more appropriate if you're doing something on a smaller scale, or that maybe projects could be more constrained by utility and servicing options. So as what Lorraine was saying in terms of from the scale of a brand new community and looking at lifting that overlay, we would be putting policy language into a secondary plan to bring implementation forward on community energy plans. When it's a plan of subdivision, we'd probably be looking at conditions of draft approval for adherence to a community energy plan that is carried out as part of clearing of conditions later on. And then we have a high performance development standard. So anything that has to go through site plan that's part of a new community would need to fulfill those requirements of the high performance development standard as part of site plan. And that is the end of our presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Gabby.
Thanks so much, Melissa. Thank you so much, Charlie and Lorraine as well. So this is time for question. If there's questions from the participants to any of the presenters. Could just raise your hand. Oh, go ahead, take it away.
Good afternoon, Gabby.
Hey
Thank
there.
you so much. Hi, I'm Sai Kumar and I'm from Cloca, Central Lake Conservation Authority, which is located in Ottawa. So my question is to Melissa. So you explained about the greenhouse gas emissions. Right now we are doing a project called SNAP. It's about the community engagement, and we are trying to make the community more sustainable. So the low impact and development technologies that are found for the town is the greenhouse gas emissions. That is one of the thing. So how can we implement that? Like, I know like you have explained in detail, but how can we implement the greenhouse gas emissions?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a
what
great
are the
question.
ways? What are the ways
Yeah.
for it?
So we have an appendix on mitigation and adaptation strategies. Maybe Gabby, you could send out the link to this document and you can sort of see what options are available to address both greenhouse gas emission reduction and also resiliency. But so obviously reducing vehicle usage. So you want to be able to design communities that are more walkable.
Right.
Looking at the block orientation, so that can also help with walkability, is shortening the blocks. Things like solar orientation and access. Looking at the actual, like the building materials can also help reduce emissions. So there's a long list, and it's something that you could take away and think about how any of these may work in your case.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, even like I had few something like the heating and cooling systems, energy conservations,
Yeah.
and trying to educate the people about the high
Yes.
efficiency systems. So we just started the project and we are trying to find the low impact and development technologies to educate the public. So yeah, I found it interesting.
Clean Air Partnership has a lot of resources that could help you also.
Yeah,
Yeah,
happy to chat with
yes.
you, Kumar, that would be if that would be of value.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
No problem. And then we have a question from Lolita. Thank you for the excellent information. How is the implementation of greenhouse gas reduction addressed at the building permit stage, and what types of information are collected? And when the building material is not available. When the building material is not available in Canada. I'm not sure I'm following the last section of that one. So we'll start first with the kind of like, how is the implementation of the greenhouse gas reduction? And I guess it's too early yet because you haven't actually gotten developments that have come in for it and gotten approved, and how you've had to verify their energy performance or GHG performance that they committed to on their application. But what are the thinking in terms of the verification that might take place?
Mhm. So thank you for the question. I think that the building code is separate. So it's separate from a plan approval. And they only look at what is required in terms of what has to be achieved within the building code. So we're trying to go over and above what is currently set out in the building code. And then the last part of the question, in terms of the materials and things like that, I don't believe that there's too much oversight there with the building code. I think a lot of it has to do with fire, the ability to respond in the event of fire and emergency access and things like that. That's like the basis on which the building code is built on, is to serve like as an emergency response type code. But if anybody else on the call wants to chime in with a response, please do.
Linda, take it away.
Yeah, I would just add very quickly that green building standards are going to be essential with any of, if we do face this situation with expansion into our rural areas. So I know in Hamilton, we're working away on finalization of an implementation strategy for green development standards, and that, my sense is that that's going to play a really critical role here.
Yeah. I have one of the questions, and I'll wait before if there's anyone else kind of like, I have some questions, but I just wanted to kind of like give participants a chance to get the questions. Take it away, Justin.
Hi, thank you. I'm really interested in the implementation side of this that you talked about, and I appreciate the approach to implement policies through a future secondary plan. I think for that to happen, though, it really requires some pretty strong political buy-in to the approach. So I'm wondering how these discussions have gone at that level. Do you have kind of confidence in your council to follow through with those secondary plan policies to ensure the energy plans and other sustainability measures are implemented, or how have those conversations been handled at that political stage?
So is that a question for me, Gabby?
Yes, for either, either you or Charlie from Ottawa.
Yeah.
Hamilton, sorry.
Okay. No, it's a great question. And I think that we're in the early days, I will say. Once we get a few of these under our belt, we'll see and have a better indication as to whether or not they have created anything that could be controversial. I don't believe so, because normally if the proponent wishes to choose a performance pathway, then it's something that they are electing to do, and they are making that choice. And we've tried to embed the flexibility to try to allow for other options to be considered.
Charlie, anything to add from?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Hamilton's a bit unique, where, as I mentioned, the province had imposed urban boundary expansion. So we did have a large greenfield area where we were expecting to start undertaking secondary planning for. And within that window, City Council approved like a framework for those secondary plan applications, which carried a lot of the same themes and targets as what is now in the urban boundary expansion framework. So So in a way, council's already given us direction on if these expansion areas are approved, what, making sure that at the secondary plan level that there's requirements in place, especially if it's privately initiated, that they have to look at the overall impacts of that neighborhood and the design that they're using, what impacts those have on the city's overall greenhouse gas emissions, and meaning a slew of other city targets and objectives. So from a political end, I think it hasn't really been an issue that has come up in Hamilton.
Perfect, thanks. Nancy, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey there.
Thanks for this, everybody. And I just wondered, I put it in the chat too, but the Ottawa presenter, and I took a screenshot of the graduated fee and off-ramps slide. And maybe Charlie would know this. To compare to the Ottawa fee structure, it seems there's a vast difference in the price for just not even submitting the application, but assessing the servicing and identifying the capacity. It looks to me like Ottawa has much higher fees. And given that land use planning is the one way to lock in greenhouse gas emissions forever, I wondered if Ottawa could maybe, the presenter could explain how the fee structure was arrived at.
Thanks, Nancy. Lorraine, are you able to kind of provide any background on that, or Melissa?
I can provide a bit of background. So when we were looking at what kind of fees that we wanted to charge, we wanted to make sure that it was a cost recovery basis. So they looked at. So we've recently updated our official plan, and of course the transportation master plan and infrastructure master plan, all those master plans feed in to each other, and to update those documents in a piecemeal approach, which is what would be required, is very expensive. So I have a slide that basically they used at the presentation, where basically our newly adopted official plan cost $3.4 million in resources, the infrastructure master plan 1.9 million, and the transportation master plan 2.3 million, and plus we have some other master plans. So all these are greatly impacted. So we are looking at and then the upfront fees before the application is what they figure that it's staff resources that would cost that, and we're actually have a position for an infrastructure person just to do that work. And we also will need to hire consultants to review the terms of references, and then of course we're expecting many of these applications to go forward to the tribunal, where there's a big set cost. So the viewpoint of the people that came up with the fee structure was that that's what it costs to review these applications.
Thanks, Lorraine. Charlie, any kind of history that you can provide in the terms of Hamilton's, like on Hamilton's approach on the charges?
Yeah, so when we were looking at our fees, one thing is under the Planning Act, I guess there's two things. That fee, when the city sets a new fee for an application, it can be paid under protest and appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but also that the Planning Act states that you can only charge a fee for cost recovery of the city to process the application. And we took the view it's from when the application is made to when council makes a decision on it, that you can't, charge for potential future OLT appeals. So because it's only 120 days, like assuming that we had full-time staff working on it, on that review within that time period, there's only so many hours in the day. So I'm kind of curious to see how I guess the developer side, how that works out in the city of Ottawa, because I've heard the same comment too, because a lot of municipalities are updating their fees, and there seems to be a wide range of different ones. So.
And then is it the case that is the fee 230 K for
That
the
is, yeah, that is the maximum fee for an official plan amendment for an
Okay.
urban village expansion.
yeah.
It's the opportunity.
Go ahead.
In Ottawa, there is an opportunity for a reduction in the fee at the front end for those stages 1 and 2. So, for example, when the province added expansion lands to the city of Ottawa and then took them back because they had added them in. There has been some work done on those land in terms of infrastructure assessment. So depending on how much work was already done, those fees, those upfront fees could be reduced. And I'd just like to note that we've got, right now we have 3 applications where they've started at least step 1. We have an application that came in before the PPS, and we have 2 appeals already. So we will be going to the tribunal. So.
Right. All right. Any other questions? Are there any, one of the questions I was having in terms of like the, any guidance to the development community in terms of tools or methodology related to the expectations from the municipality? Like, is it about how they do the community energy plan as long as they meet the criteria for the municipality? Or are there any tools that municipalities are like recommending to be used in order to help kind of meet the requirements in terms of community energy planning and doing GHG and land use implications understanding? I was just wondering what kind of tools might have come, or what kind of methodology municipalities might have recommended to the development community for these applications.
We have had a number of conversations with the development community. They primarily are relying on their consultants to bring forward the community energy plan. So the terms of reference sort of sets out who we think is appropriate to prepare a community energy plan. And we've had a number of meetings back and forth to try to talk about what's, it's the art of the possible, right? So just trying to make them familiar with what is in the terms of reference. So there are quite a few examples of what they could incorporate, as I was mentioning in the appendix. But normally what I have seen is that they build a team. We can advise them on their team, but they certainly can get the expertise to put these together on their own.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Melissa. Charlie, any input on that topic that you've heard from the development community?
No, very similar to the city of Ottawa. With one thing with our approach, where there has been some tension, is that because we're asking for this a lot of this information up front with their initial urban boundary expansion application, we're hearing from the development industry that this is stuff that should be dealt at the secondary plan stage, and let's just decide whether we should look at bringing these lands into the urban boundary and then deal with this later on. But it's one thing that the city has been pushing for, is getting as much detail on like what types of uses, what are the densities, what's the estimated population and the time frame within these urban expansion areas, so that we understand what the impact is to the city's overall growth strategy. And it's been one of the, I'll call it like a tension point, where whenever we've had a conversation, we want more information, and they're more reluctant to give that. So it kind of raises the need to have clear policies in place and clear terms of reference. So that expectation is set.
Perfect. Thanks, Charlie. I did want to kind of ask if there's other municipalities who are going through this process with regards to their urban expansion. So I know it's not something that every municipality is going to have to need to be dealing with. There's some areas, the municipalities that are completely grown out and don't have any urban expansion opportunities. But I know for other municipalities, I just wanted to get a sense if there's other municipalities who are moving down this journey of how are they going to handle urban expansion requests. I'm okay with awkward silences. But there has to be municipalities looking into this. Can't be just Ottawa and Hamilton. You guys are just going to let the time run out, aren't you? All right. I will be following up with you because I know that there's other municipalities working on this topic. So I'll be following up with you. I did want to give a little plug out, and I know this is one of the issues on that FCM has developed on this one, that with working with SSG, but this might be something that could help municipalities verify some of the input that they're getting from the development community, in the sense that there is the land use impact calculator that FCM developed with Sustainable Solutions Group that might be able to serve as a mechanism for municipalities to at least verify some of the information that they're getting from the development community. I threw in the link for that land use impact calculator, because it does look at kind of taking these like urban expansions, calculating out what their infrastructure costs are, what their GHG implications are associated with different types of land use growth, where it occurs, and all that kind of stuff. It is a high level tool. It's not something that in terms of like that's the nitty gritty, like that will do your development cost studies or anything like that. But it certainly is a kind of maybe it's an Excel tool that might be able to help some municipalities as they start trying to consider what are the greenhouse gas and infrastructure implications associated with these urban expansion requests, and some verification on the input that they're getting from the development community. So I will be following up with folks, because I do know that there's many other municipalities. Okay, thank you, Brandon. London is currently working through an official plan review and urban growth boundary expansion. They're still working on implementation strategy and the application process for the expansion request. Currently, they're directed towards interested landowners to engage in the ongoing boundary review. So I'll follow up with you, Brendan, if that's okay. Is like, as you go down the journey in London, we'd love to learn about the approach that you're using in London and kind of sharing it across different municipalities. So perfect. Thanks so much from others. And if there's others, if you could send me an email, throw it into the chat, whatever you want to do, I'll just put it on the list of things to follow up with you at a future time to kind of advance this conversation. And then we're going to be sharing some of the resources. So I'll kind of like share some of the Hamilton resources, the Ottawa resources, along with the presentations and the webinar recording, and so that you could share that with others in your municipality who are on the urban expansion file to facilitate some sharing across the municipalities. I did want to give you a really big shout out to Charlie, to Lorraine, and to Melissa. Thank you so much for taking the time to share the stories of your journeys within your municipalities and the resources and the approach that you're using, and helping other municipalities get that leg up so that they're not starting from scratch. Thank you so much for doing that. There's just too much to do and not enough time for us to all start from scratch on this place. So we want to be able to leapfrog over each other. And I will send everything out with the proceedings from the webinar. Thank you for all your participation in this webinar. And again, thank you to our presenters. And thanks, Charlie, for coming to join in the webinar despite feeling sick. I really appreciate that. And have a great day, everybody. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Gabby.
Melissa, did you want me to just give you a call? Is that okay? Do you want me to do that? Okay, I'll do that. Perfect. Thanks so much.
In Zoom or Teams?
Okay. I'll call you on Teams if that's okay. All right, perfect. Thanks so much, everybody. See you later. Take care.